Talk Radio Network. I'm Joe Joseph, along with my good buddy Johnny King. Johnny, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Absolutely fantastic. I'm excited about tonight's show, Joe.
Oh, as am I. Because, you know, folks, when we have Michael Badnarik on the broadcast, it always ends up being an exciting broadcast. Of course, Michael Badnarik, his website, constitutionpreservation.org, the 2004 Libertarian presidential candidate and author of the books It's Good to Be King, and his latest book, Secret to Sovereignty, or How to Survive the Second American Revolution. Michael, welcome to the broadcast tonight.
Thank you so much for having me back.
It's fantastic to have you. And my sole purpose tonight, as I told you before the show, is to see how high I can get your blood pressure to go. It's almost like Sideshow Bob. Yes, I have Michael Badnarik tonight. Let's see how much we can go. I'm taking bets, folks. So let's see how high we can get the diastolic pressure to go.
I'm actually a pretty calm individual. I got everything under control.
Yes, you do. I have to admit, and a tip of the hat to you for that in these days, because it's harder and harder to do that. And I want to start off first just talking about your latest book a little bit, The Secret to Sovereignty, or How to Survive the Second American Revolution. Speak a little bit about what inspired you to write that book.
I started teaching my Constitution class 15 years ago, and before I even finish a class, most people are asking me, how do I? Questions. How do I, travel without a driver's license? How do I not fill out my 1040 form? How do I, carry a gun without a permit? And, I'm inundated by these questions. So I figured that instead of answering the questions over the phone, one at a time, I would put my answers and my responses in a book and publish the book. That way I can, save myself a lot of time on the phone. This is not a how-to step-by-step guide for, paperwork that you can mail the government. If anybody thinks that you can mail a letter to the government that's going to make the government just shrivel up and go away, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid. That's not going to happen. But it's an internal thing. What are the things that you need to do in order to prepare yourself to, take such actions? And, knowing the answer is not difficult. Having the courage to follow through with the answer is a little bit tougher. If I go to the doctor and say, "Doctor, I'm a couch potato, the girls won't look at me," what do I need to do in order to, to get myself really buff? The doctor will say, well, you got to give up junk food. You got to start eating, salads and health food, and you got to go to the gym. Well, you don't need a medical degree to know that. You could have saved yourself an appointment with the doctor. I can tell you that. Now, the question is following through with it. Everybody makes New Year's Eve resolutions, and one of the most common is, this year I'm going to really exercise. I'm going to get myself in shape. And what usually happens is people, they take out the membership at the club, they go to the gym, a dozen times in a row, and, life gets in the way, and they stop going. So knowing what to do is not difficult. Having the courage and determination to continue and follow through is where people need the support.
No, you're absolutely right. There, you know how many times people have written and asked me about, well, how do I go about getting the UCC1 form? And how do you go about it? And you need the purple ink here and the green ink here. And make sure you put your thumbprint here. And I said, you know where that's going to go? That's going to go right into the circular file of whoever receives it. That's after your name gets put on the crackpot list for, for them when they come around and want to round you up. So all you're doing is putting yourself out there as a target. Now, the issue that I have is one that you have, that people make these, they find the resolve to state that they're not happy with the way things are, but that's kind of as far as it goes. They don't really take it to the next level or do the things necessary to really affect change. And one thing that I've learned, Michael, is that good change never comes from the top down. I have yet to see it happen.
Well, that's true. And I also point out to people that I don't give legal advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. What I can do is tell you what I have done. And my book is very much an opening of my life. I usually keep my private life to myself. But in this book, I've opened up and tell people things that I've done, explained the way that I've done it. And, it's really just a narrative of my life. And if you want to follow my example, I'm happy to have you stand beside me. But again, I'm not telling anybody what they should do. I don't have any pat answers because the government's corrupt. I mean, even if I did send a letter to the IRS and the IRS said, Michael, you never have to pay taxes again. If you copied my letter and just replaced your name in all the appropriate places, there's no guarantee that the IRS is going to send you a similar letter. They don't play by any set, group of rules.
That's right. The other thing that I've always said too is we could end this game tomorrow. All we have to do is stop participating in this corrupt system, and it's game over. The issue is you have to have enough people behind you when you do it, because if you try to do it onesie-twosie, they can handle that. It's like missing your mob tribute payment. Oh yeah, that's no problem. They'll just come and break your legs. They'll get their payment one way or another. But the issue that we have in this country is there's not enough people really making that stand to the point where the government or these nefarious people are going to back down. You know what I mean? So how do you go about affecting change in such a fashion where we can have positive momentum in that direction?
Well, I agree that the government won't go away until we have enough people stand up. But if you're on the Titanic and the boat is obviously going to sink, somebody's going to have to be the first one to jump in a lifeboat. And, you can stand there and wait for a line to form, or you can, have the guts and say, this is what I'm doing. When you're in Nazi Germany and they say that you're going to, they're going to take you to the concentration camp, you can stand in line with everybody else and huddle in fear, or you can say, you got to catch me first, and make their job more difficult. So, and that is one of the aspects of my book. I talk about fear and how that will inhibit what you do with regard to restoring your liberty. So, again, the book is more about what is inside of you and how you, handle things personally, more so than fill out this form, get it certified, go to the,
right on
county courthouse.
Hold that thought, Michael. Let's go to break. When we come back, we'll have more with Michael Badnarik. I want to talk a little bit more about that fear factor that Michael just talked about when we return. Don't go away, folks. Much more to come.
Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of fear.
Welcome back, folks. Don't forget the email address. Should you feel like emailing me with your questions, comments, suggestions, is info@thefreedomlink.net. That's info@thefreedomlink.net. And you can visit our website, www.thefreedomlink.net. Now, should you want to schedule Michael for a Constitution class, of course, you know he travels the world teaching the Constitution far and wide. You can call him 512-461-0995. Don't mind the secretary. She sounds a little butch. But I'll tell you what. You get Michael out there, he'll get the job done, teach you the Constitution. And we're so glad to have him here. Now, Michael, we were talking about the fear factor. And I think that you hit on a very good point. You can't fear standing up for your rights. We ultimately have to defend our rights. There's nobody else that's going to defend them for us. Yeah, that's evidently, or at most crystal clear, especially in these days. But why do you think there's such apprehension when it comes to standing up for your rights? I mean, why isn't there more of a value being put on our natural rights?
Well, one of the reasons most people don't do it is because you could die. You know, you go up against the mafia and, they can have you killed. And one of our, reasons for being here is life, liberty, and private property. So anything that, says that we may lose our life is, that's got to, give you some pause. And you would be an idiot not to be concerned for your life. However, if you and I go to Vegas and a couple of big, goons throw us into a limo, take us into the Nevada desert, and hand us a shovel and tell us to dig a hole. Just off the top of your head, what do you think they're asking us to dig this hole for? You think they're helping us dig for buried treasure? I mean,
no.
we'd have to be an idiot to not realize that they want us to dig our own grave.
Right.
Now, I may die, but I'm not going to die tired. I'm not going to make their job easy. I'm not going to dig my own grave and then curl up in the fetal position at the bottom of this hole so they can shoot me with no muss, no fuss. Now, first of all, if it's taken me this long to realize that I'm in danger, then, I need to have my head examined. But if you've handed me a shovel, I'm going to make sure that I'm not the only one going home with a headache. That shovel is a weapon, and I'm going to swing it as hard and as fast as I can for the explicit purpose of removing at least one head from a pair of shoulders.
Amen to that. I'm taking one with me if I got to go.
If I've got to go, I'm not going to die alone.
That's right.
So Thomas Jefferson recognized that there are only three possibilities in life. Number one, you can live free in liberty. Number two, you can fight for liberty and possibly die in that fight. Or number three, you can give up and live as a slave. Now, I don't know about your listeners, but as for me and Patrick Henry, slavery is not an option. Right. Not going to happen. No way. Don't even think about it. So if you take slavery off the table, if that's no longer an option, then you're left with liberty or death. I mean, this is not just a bumper sticker. I mean, this is a dedication to life. It's not a fear of life or anything. This is a dedication to life. This is my life. I'm going to live it my way. I refuse to be a slave to anybody. It's not going to happen.
But the American people are willing slaves, Michael, through the use of usury.
Well, I guess I understand that. But I am trying to explain that life as a slave is not worth living.
Right.
If I can't live with my freedom, then something's going to happen. And if we succumb to fear, if we allow our fear of the government to prevent us from taking action, then the government's already won.
I have to agree. I have to agree with you there. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like 2 + 2 is 4. Yeah, Michael, I got to agree with you. Well, it's just a matter of fact.
It is. I mean, there's no disputing it. You're right. Now here, let me throw this at you, because you see you see where we're at right now. Tonight, I'm going to go over some of the latest current events to kind of validate this. But there's a lot of attacks right now coming down on us from various fronts, whether it be the Second Amendment, whether it be the economy, whether it be, everybody being thrown out on their ass due to this sequester that's coming down the pipe. And that's a giant scam in and of itself. And I want to speak to that and get your thoughts on that as well. But one thing is for certain through all of this is that I feel like people don't feel like they have control of things. And as it stands right now, they don't. However, how hard do you think it would be to wrestle control back from these people? I mean, what do you think ultimately it's going to take?
Well, there's kind of a sliding scale. If you've got lots of money, you can pretty much buy whatever you want. Life is easy. If you don't have a lot of money, then you got to, make choices, and you got to decide, whether you're going to buy the ramen noodles and spend the rest of the money on something else. I mean, it just makes life a little bit more difficult. So it would be easy to change the government. Yeah. If we had, 310 million people stand up together and go, screw this. We're not putting up with this crap anymore. You people are guilty of treason. You're going to jail. If we have lots and lots of people, then the change is easy and it's peaceful. If there are very few people, then it's going to be difficult and probably bloody. And, I mean, I don't get to pick, how many people there are. I mean, I'm in. I'm all in. There is no chance that I am going to let anybody take my property, take my guns, put me into slavery, give me a mandatory vaccination. No way. I mean, I may die in the process, but right up until that moment, I am living my life as a free man. Nobody tells me what to do. And that's been true since before I was 1 year old. Ask my mother.
I don't doubt it for a second. I don't doubt it for a second. Now, one thing, in the next segment coming up, I'm going to play you a piece, a news piece that just came out. And it's a very interesting piece. It's out of Alabama. And the interesting thing about this is the fact that this mayor is going about putting an ordinance in place that's you're going to say to yourself, I believe it, but what would you do about it if it happened to you? We're going to talk about this when we come back from break. Folks, don't go away. Much more with Michael Badnarik when the Freedom Link returns right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. If you're tired of corporations and Big Brother using your cell phone to illegally spy on you, then please sign the petition to stop these people from data mining your phone. They're taking your texts, your emails, your contacts, your browsing history, and your phone records for their own profit. and for Big Brother to keep tabs on you. Please sign the petition on the front page of our website and help Orion Talk Radio stop illegal cell phone spying on we the people. Joe Joseph here, along with John King and our special guest, Michael Badnarik. His website, www.constitutionpreservation.org. And we're going to get into a case study, I guess you could say. And I'm going to use this news piece as a reference just to highlight the hypocrisy
Disaster emergency
goes
ordinance
on.
in
Here it
Gunnersville is causing some controversy. The city council is considering a new ordinance that gives the city more power in the event of a major disaster. As Way 31's Tim Reed reports, part of the ordinance deals with officers possibly disarming people.
By no means is it our intent to disarm or seize anyone's firearms.
The mayor of Gunnersville.
Well, I just want to stop that right there for just 1 second. Now, they're introducing an ordinance to disarm people, but it's not their intent to disarm people. Did you hear that, Michael? Like I heard that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to get that straight. Now, I'm 10 seconds into this, so you can imagine where this is going.
Wants to set the record straight. A proposed disaster emergency ordinance in Gunnersville is causing some controversy. Lee Dollar says part of that ordinance would give city police officers the power to disarm residents only if necessary during major disasters.
Let me stop that right there. When is it necessary to disarm people in this country, Michael?
Well, according to that document, it's whenever the police officer, in their own good judgment, feels that it's necessary. But I want to let all of the police officers know that, you know, if you try to remove my guns from my body, I'm not going to be the only one dead that afternoon.
That's right. But even so, I mean, rights can't be taken away. You have to give them away.
No, you can't give them away. Even if you wanted to, you can't give them away. The whole, I mean, this is, you're right, this is all just hypocrisy. And the idea that, I mean, they're contradicting themselves in the first 10 seconds. You know, it's an ordinance to take guns away, but we're not going to take your guns away. And then they say, well, we're only going to take your guns away if the police officer thinks that it's necessary. Well, I had a friend who said that, you know, I'm not giving up my guns unless hell freezes over. And I called him an incredibly derogatory name. And he goes, what the heck's the matter with you? And I said, well, I'm not giving up my guns even if hell does freeze over. I had a heart attack in 2009, and it is reported, I don't know for sure, that I was dead for 10 minutes. And people want to know how I came back to life. And I told them that when I got to St. Peter and the Pearly Gates, he wanted to collect my guns, and I decided that was unacceptable.
Go ahead, John. I know you got something to add.
Absolutely. They set a precedent when they confiscated the guns back during Hurricane Katrina. You may remember they called martial law and went through and confiscated the residents' guns. That set a precedent. It was the first prick test. This is the second prick test. They're going to tell all the sheeple that they don't want to disarm them, but give me your guns, and they're going to go along with it.
But what the hell does precedent have to do with anything? You know, the law is the law. I remember the saying that's on the front of the Supreme Court building that I believe says equal justice under the law. I wish that we lived in a society where that held true. But unfortunately, now we live in a society where it's social justice under the law, or, you know, whatever clique actually has power. If you're not friendly with them or have some sort of contact within or whatever, you're on the other side.
Well, you also have to remember that in was it Animal Story? The animals wrote on the side of the barn that all animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Exactly. I mean, this is what we're up against, is this ideology, this idea. You know, that's the one thing that I can't stand about our judicial system, is the fact that judicial precedence weighs so heavily on these judges and their decisions. I mean, that and the fact that, you know, political ideology certainly has a lot to do with it and everything else. But the fact that precedent is just such a heavy influence when these judges go and they make their decision. Because to me, Michael, it's like a bunch of lemmings jumping off the cliff. You know?
Well, precedent is only important if you are incapable of understanding the principle that's involved. You know, if I have to go back and see what your answer for 2 + 2 was, it's because I don't know how to add. If I say, well, you know, 2 + 2 must equal 4 because that's what Joe said last week. And on the other hand, if I know how to do arithmetic on my own, I don't need to look back at Joe's answer to see what 2 + 2 is equal to. So precedent is really kind of a bad thing all the way around. And again, we the people need to understand what the principle of the Constitution is so that we can understand when the government is getting outside that scope.
Right on, right? I mean, absolutely. So this is all very interesting, but it gets better. It gets better. These people in Guntersville, they're actually standing up and protesting this, which is why they're actually having to fend off and explain themselves. But let's continue with this Travis Shamockery.
This is in there to protect public workers and any volunteers helping should someone become unruly, which can happen because emotions are high, that it would give an officer that authority. And it's only to protect people.
Now, I always thought that my gun was to protect me. Having a little issue here. But I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. I understand what she's saying in that, okay, you know, you have a disaster like a Katrina or something like that. You get looters. The looters may have guns. And so the idea is, well, then let's just disarm everybody. But the problem that there is with that is that the criminal element don't give their guns away. They don't turn them in. It's only the law-abiding citizens that go down, bah, here you go, here's my gun. And so then all you have is a criminal element with guns, and you have these poor people now that are also suffering from whatever disaster just took place, only now they can't defend themselves in their household when first responders are probably stretched way past their limit as it is in that type of scenario. Would you say that's right, Michael?
Yeah, for the most part. What they're doing in this, you know, news report is they are painting a very ambiguous picture. They're suggesting that there are times when, you know, somebody has to be disarmed, and they're suggesting that they're only going to disarm people when it's appropriate, which makes it a difficult argument to challenge. It's like, well, okay, yes, there are some times when, you know, it's, you know, appropriate to disarm somebody. But from my point of view, those are exactly the point, the situations where I'm just going to use my gun. Technically, I didn't disarm you. I killed you to make it impossible for you to use your gun. And I promise that I am only going to use my gun when it's appropriate.
Right.
So there would be no reason for a police officer to try to remove my gun from me because, I mean, I've promised that it's only going to be when it's appropriate.
And in the grand scheme of things, you're making his job easier.
We were made to be courageous.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they don't have to come looking for me because, you know, I'm on their team. And, you know, Michael promises only to use the gun when it's appropriate.
That's awesome. Time for another break, folks. When we come back, last segment of hour number 1. Boy, time flies when you're having fun. We'll be right back after these messages. We'll finish up this little news piece from Guntersville, Alabama. and then we'll move on to other fun and exciting topics. Don't go away. Much more when the Freedom Link returns, right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Welcome back, folks. I'd like to invite everybody, if you don't know about the Manford Minute, to tune in, as his show comes right before the Freedom Link every Monday to Friday, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. John Manford does a great broadcast, fantastic show, and I'm so glad to have John Manford on board here at the Orion Talk Radio Network. So tune into the Manford Minute every Monday to Friday, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, for some fantastic radio. And then you can follow it up with a little bit of the Freedom Link. Boy, life doesn't get any better than that.
Like salt and pepper on your taters.
Amen to that, Johnny. We're joined by Michael Badnarik, ConstitutionPreservation.org. Again, if you want to schedule Michael Badnarik for a Constitution seminar, you can do so by contacting him at 512-461-0995. If you go to his website, it tells you exactly how to do it, what you need. And Michael, do you got anything coming up, coming down the pipe?
I have a class that's going to happen here in Northwest Indiana, in Munster, Indiana, that will occur on Saturday, March 16th at this point in time.
Very good. So anybody in the Indiana area or even Chicago, by all means, go ahead out there and learn a thing or two, especially you Chicagoans, because I often think that there's not much help for you. But you never know. Maybe Michael can spark a fire in you, and you can change things in the city of Chicago. God bless you and more power to you. But we're talking about Guntersville, Alabama. Very, very interesting little proposal down there about an ordinance to take guns away in a martial law scenario or disaster situation. Let's finish up and listen into what they have to say about that.
The city's proposed ordinance is hitting the wrong notes at the Guntersville Music Academy. Music teachers and Guntersville businessmen Keith Sullivan and Paul Landry oppose the law.
Well, it seems like an infringement on the Second Amendment, I think.
Let me stop it right there, Michael. Did you see the problem with his statement right there?
His uncertainty as to whether or not it violates the Second Amendment?
Amen to that. What the hell is wrong with people? Well, it seems that it would. I mean, how about, no, it's a damn infringement upon my Second Amendment right. And according to the Second Amendment, and this right shall not be infringed. That's how I would handle it. I don't know. Maybe it's not politically correct enough. Maybe I have to go on there and say, well, it seems like they did.
Well, this is the Hegelian dialectic. They're trying to get you to compromise.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're trying to get you to compromise.
That's the biggest...
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. They're trying to get you to compromise your rights, and there is no compromise. You know, it's not going to happen. Not while I'm able to take a breath.
I've always said that, you know, that's one of Satan's biggest tools is compromise, you know. You know what? You can have that. Have one more cigarette because there's always tomorrow. You know, don't worry about that. There's always tomorrow. Everything will be fine. No, we're not going to take your guns away. Just in an emergency situation, you know, just to make sure that our first responders and your neighbors are safe.
Would you compromise with a rapist or a murderer? Why would you compromise with a politician?
Yeah, you're right. It's funny, you know, one of my students, Michael, now mind you, she's 15 years old, and she came to me and she just wanted, she likes to write a saying on the board every week. Sometimes she comes up with them herself, or she regurgitates ones that she's heard in her research. And she writes this one on the board, and it really made my heart jump a little bit. And she says, if the opposite of pro is con, is the opposite of progress Congress? And I was like, ooh, let's all sit back for about 10 minutes in deep thought, shall we? But it's so refreshing to see these kids, these teenagers, taking ownership at such a young age. Popeye from federaljack.com and Down the Rabbit Hole, he just recently had a 12-year-old on speaking about these issues that we face. And I guess the silver lining in this cloud is the fact that through all of this, all of these egregious usurpations of our natural God-given rights, what we're seeing, though, is a resurgence of parents taking ownership, like, for example, pulling their kids out of public school and homeschooling them, making them more aware of how things really are supposed to be and where the problem really lies. And so I'm encouraged by that, because it's just like what happens when you gain weight. You know, as you get older, you start to put on the pounds. It's really easy to get fat. It's not so easy to get skinny again. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot longer than it took you to get fat. Well, we're in the same situation now, where it was really easy for us to dig a hole for ourselves. It's not going to be easy to dig us out, to get us out. What's your thoughts on that, Michael?
I agree. I've been doing the same thing, trying to get myself into physical shape by swimming. And if I miss a couple of days, it feels like I have to start all over from scratch. And it frustrates me that that is true. I mean, life is not fair, but because of that, it makes me relentless. I make sure that I get up and I get to the pool every morning, mostly because I know how difficult it's going to be if I don't go to the pool. So protecting our rights and our liberty basically is the same way. And Thomas Jefferson said that liberty requires eternal vigilance. The price of liberty is, eternal vigilance. So we've got to stay constantly active and constantly watch, what the politicians are doing.
And believe me, they try to get everything they possibly can. And it's interesting because I was just reading an article. We're talking about the sequester the other night, and there was an article that came out at a Bloomberg editorial that basically said that we subsidize the banking industry to the tune of $83 billion a year through the manipulation of interest rates and interesting things like that. But basically, if you took away this subsidy, that the banks would pretty much break even, that $83 billion actually adds up to the profit of the profits for that year from all the banks. And it's quite interesting also that the price tag of this sequester is $85 billion. But even more important, and I want to get into this next hour, as far as your take on this sequester and how it is. Now, I'm of the firm belief that we're just being bamboozled 6 ways from Sunday. But before we go to break, Michael, what is, just to throw it out there, this sequester, what is your thoughts on it? And do you feel like it's just more political Hollywood, if you will?
Oh, yes, it's political Hollywood. They make it sound as if, the clock is going to strike 12. All of this money is suddenly going to just, throw the economy into disarray. Well, the cuts that they're talking about are really, insignificant. It's like somebody crying and oohing and ahhing because, they're in so much pain, and they've got this little tiny splinter. It's like, if if that's what's causing you pain, wait until we get to some real cuts.
Right. My brother and I were just talking about that tonight. And, he's of the opinion that the crash is imminent. And I've always said that, and my life experience shows me that the way that I view things or the way that I envision things coming down the pipe never end up materializing the way I envision it. It's always something totally off kilter or something totally from left field that I wasn't expecting to be the catalyst for change. Like, I never would have thought about planes being flown into a building on September 11th. Never in a million years would I have envisioned that particular thing taking place to usher in this police state. And you want to talk about Hegelian dialectic. I mean, that was like the textbook example of what the Hegelian dialectic's all about. Here you have a bill that's sat dormant. They try to push it through time and time and time again. Can't get it through, so they shelve it. Next thing you know, 9/11 comes, and out it comes the Patriot Act. Oh, we'll change the name of it. We'll put Patriot in there. I mean, you'd be stupid not to vote for it. It's got the word Patriot in it. I actually heard that a congressman actually said that, Michael. How could you not vote for it? It's got Patriot in it. Well, it's unbelievable.
I heard the Speaker of the House say that we have to vote for it so we know it's in the bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we are today, folks. Hour number 1 is done. Hour number 2 is on the way. Much more with Michael Badnarik, ConstitutionPreservation.org, when the Freedom Link returns. So go get a cup of coffee, a Coca-Cola, and some popcorn. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. It's hour number 2 of the Freedom Link, right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I'm Joe Joseph, along with John King, our special guest, Michael Badnarik, ConstitutionPreservation.org, 2004 Libertarian presidential candidate. If you ever want to schedule a Constitution class with Michael, I'll tell you how. Routinely, periodically throughout this broadcast, best money that you'll ever spend. Get Michael out there to teach people how the Constitution, how this country is really supposed to operate and what the Constitution really means. But before we get back into it with Michael, and I also have a special treat on the other side of the King's Court. Oh, I just gave it away. It's time to call the King's Court into session. John, take it away.
I talked to someone at work today about the sequester and gun control. Now, most of you know I do not believe in gun control, aside from being able to hit your target. When there's a new disease running rampant, science comes up with a vaccine as soon as it can, and the medical community puts out information to educate the people. But what about gun education instead of gun control? Thomas Jefferson said the people should not only be well-armed, but educated in the way of the use of the firearm. My coworker was also talking to me about permits. He told me about his gun permit was going to expire and he had to buy another. And I explained to him how silly he was because of his gun permit will not expire until he decides he no longer needs it. And it was signed into law way back on December 15th, 1791. I also explained to him that the permit meant permission. I could see the disconnect in his eyes when I said permit, permission. He still didn't see it, so I prodded him more. I commented on the fact that ABC News was caught editing Michelle Obama's automatic weapons claim earlier in the day. When he told me during our conversation on gun control that 70% of Americans are in favor of gun control, I quickly asked him where he got his stats from, as he just looked at me as I called his bluff. When I quickly added, if you're getting your stats from the news organizations that edit out important information, how can you trust their stats? At that, he became angry because I poked him in the figurative eye, and now he has to question his reality. He will come around, he has no choice, as I am relentless at chipping away at the false facade he calls life. I also told him that when, not if, the 1.5 quadrillion in derivatives bubble pops, it will make the Great Depression look like a strong recovery. That was one of the reasons why they want your guns. We're living under the rule of the modern-day tyrants who fear no public retaliation. Just look at the laws they pass. Many people contemplate the meaning of life, and I have no time for such trivial things. I spend my time contemplating how we let ourselves get this far down the road to utter despotism. When our dear leaders can grant themselves the power to tag, snag, and bag you by executive decree, do we really have a constitutional republic of the people? If you think the laws that govern your everyday life now suck, what do you think they're going to look like when the master adorns the garments of the slave? Court adjourned.
Thank you, John King. Always good as usual. Now, Michael, as we get into hour number 2, I got a special treat because joining the broadcast very soon is my friend Dan. He has a YouTube channel, EducatoriumEuphorium. Now, Dan is a teenager, a homeschool student, and he's just tickled pink that you're on the air right now. So I said, well, why don't you come on and talk to Michael yourself? So he's going to be with us shortly. But in this hour, I want to bring this up, too. Every time in history, and I think you have to be a student of history in order to understand what's actually unfolding in this country. Every time in history where there's been a gun grab, fairly soon after that, genocide follows. Isn't that right, Michael?
Well, that's the premise. I recommend that your listeners go to the internet and watch a video. It's a documentary created by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. The documentary is called Innocence Betrayed. And I don't recommend that you watch it just before you go to bed.
Yeah.
Because you probably won't be able to sleep.
Yeah, you can actually find that. You can actually find that, Michael, right on the front page of Orion Talk Radio, OrionTalkRadio.com. We actually have that about halfway down on the right-hand side. You can actually watch it right there. But, man, you better prepare yourself because it's pretty graphic.
It is disturbing to realize how many people since in the last century were killed by their own governments. And as you say, each time that happened, it was preceded by gun control. The government took the guns away, and they like to do that because then you can't fight back. So, people who can't fight back are much easier to exterminate.
Yeah, and you also brought up compromise, being one of the tools that they use to advance the agenda. And so you had Dianne Feinstein go and introduce that the bill that would, ban semi-automatic rifles, as well as, a vast array of different types of guns. It'll put, these universal background checks. Private sales now have to go through background checks. The whole shooting match. And in looking at it, it doesn't seem realistic, at least at this time, that her bill in its form passed both chambers of the House. However, the one thing that I said is that out of all of that stuff that they put in there, the two most important pieces of the puzzle is the background check and gun registration. That's really what they're striving for. And wouldn't you know it, just now, they're negotiating for just that, for background checks, no matter what, and gun registration. So, what's your thoughts on that? I think that if they get that through and that goes through, and it's a very good possibility that it does, I think that starts the beginning of the end for a lot of ways, a lot of the way of life that we're used to, things are really going to dynamically change at that point, don't you think?
Well, they are going to change. I've been trying to stop this slide into socialism for the last, 30 years. Unfortunately, a lot of people really don't care. And, they just refuse to understand. So, I've got a couple questions. Is the current administration going to wake up and realize that it's impossible to collect all the guns in the United States? The answer is no. They are relentless. They are going to continue their irresistible march until they've collected all the guns. Everything else is just practice leading up to that point. After the Sandy Hook shooting, within the first 3 weeks of the Sandy Hook shooting, Americans purchased 10 million guns.
Isn't that, what a, brings a tear to my eye, I'll tell you.
That, first of all, just, understanding how many 10 million is.
That's amazing. Staggering number.
Staggering number of guns.
Hold that thought. When we come back, I want to talk more about that with Michael. And also we'll be getting my friend Dan, EducatoriumEuphorium on YouTube, right on the broadcast. Stay tuned. Much more to come.
Your abilities are awesome and may be called upon by concentrating your thought energies with definite purpose. Just concentrate.
Welcome back, everybody. Don't forget the email address, info@thefreedomlink.net. That's info@thefreedomlink.net. And our website, www.thefreedomlink.net. What a fantastic night. We've got Michael Badnarik, constitutionpreservation.org. If you go there, you can purchase his books, Good to Be King and The Secret to Sovereignty. And also, if you would like to schedule a class with Michael, it is very, very easy to do so. Very easy to do so. If you just go and give him a call, his number 512-461-0995, you can schedule a date and a time with Michael to come to your area and teach the Constitution to you and your friends, your family, your coworkers. Heck, your state representatives. Put them in the State House. Let them teach them how it is things are supposed to be run. But, folks, we're also joined tonight by a very good friend, Dan, who a homeschool student, and he has a YouTube channel. I suggest, folks, that you go and subscribe today. He has some great stuff on there. His YouTube channel is EducatoriumEuphorium. And, Dan, it's so good to have you back on the broadcast, especially with Michael right here. Two good libertarians to talk about some current events.
It's great.
So Dan, anything that you want to talk to Michael about?
Yeah, Mr. Badnarik, I was kind of wondering. I see that you ran for president and for Congress as a Libertarian Party candidate, and I'm just kind of wondering, what are your views on like the Federal Reserve and monetary issues? Because that's been something that has really interested me for a long time.
The Federal Reserve is completely, totally, 100% unconstitutional. The Constitution explicitly states that the states will not use anything but gold and silver coin as tender in payment of debt. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 says that Congress can coin money and regulate the value thereof. The reason that we would use gold and silver is because they cannot be counterfeited. There's only so much of it to go around, and the value of it will stay the same. When they falsely gave the Federal Reserve, a private corporation, the authority to counterfeit our money for the last 100 years, that is directly what has caused the fiscal problems that we're having right now. All of these bubbles are caused by, just the relentless printing of paper money, which makes the money that you already have worth less. And they've printed so much that your money is now worthless. And, people are coming to that realization. There's going to be a major, major upheaval in this country and around the world as, people struggle to, reorganize the economy.
Dan, the floor is yours, my man. Take advantage of this time while you have it.
All right. So I was also something that's really been jumping out at me lately when I'm watching TV, because recently, honestly, I've become kind of disillusioned with politics. I had a lot of hope when Ron Paul was running for president that we might have some change. We might finally have, some sanity restored to our government and our country. But after that whole that thing kind of fizzled out there, I just watching the news, it just becomes just like face palming all the time, because it's just the same old thing over and over. No one's really seeing the big picture. No one's really looking at like the boom and bust cycle, these kind of things that we've known for a long time, but we still seem to refuse to accept. So it almost seems to me that at this point, the government is beyond saving in a way. And it really, if we're going to change the nation, if we're going to change the path we're on, it really needs to start from the bottom up with the people. And I'm wondering if what you think of that, because you've been really involved with constitutional issues, and Constitution, even though it's definitely a great tool and we definitely need to turn back to it, it is still something that relies on a government that will actually follow it. So how much do you think we need to focus on actually trying to change the government, and how much do you think we have to focus on, changing ourselves and changing the way we view the world and changing the way we're living our lives?
I like the way you asked that question. I have for a long time thought that it's not the government, it's us. I mean, we the people ordained and established the Constitution. We invented government. It is our responsibility to hold that government accountable. And, unfortunately, most people just like to point their finger and say, okay, it's your fault. But I agree with you that the government is pretty much out of control. I don't think that we can save it. I'm fairly convinced that the economy is going to crash. There's going to be a lack of food. There's going to be civil unrest. The government is going to declare martial law, which really is an announcement that the Constitution no longer exists. And there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. And it is our responsibility to get things back under control and to make sure that we restore the republic and do not allow one of the varietal forms of socialism to take place. So I think it's very astute that you recognize we have to look inward and stop worrying about changing the people in Washington, D.C.
And on that kind of note, on that subject, do you think that there's a way, and this is something that Ron Paul talked about, and when they'd always ask him, well, how do you think you can win? You have such, radical views or whatever. How do you think you can get a consensus and enough people to actually get behind you to win the election? He would point out something, which is, I think, something that a lot of people overlook, which is too many times we see in Washington that liberals and conservatives unite on statism or on increasing government. They unite over drone strikes. They unite over spending increases. But Ron Paul's idea was, well, can't we, unite them over the idea of liberty? Conservatives like economic liberty, liberals like social liberty. Is there a way we could bring them together on that? And instead of having this kind of process where there's this fighting, but they always resolve it with a larger state and more government, is there a way you think that we can bring the left and the right together with their, the good qualities that they each have, and kind of create like a synthesis where we can, finally get a kind of system where we can move forward and increase liberty instead of constantly chipping away at it?
No, and that's because the left and the right are only pretend adversaries. They have no intention of uniting for liberty, because they are both criminal, they're both corrupt, and their goal on both sides of the aisle is to increase the size of government and increase their level of power.
It's a false left-right paradigm, isn't it, Mike?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. They're never going to unite for liberty because that's not their goal. I mean, they can give all sorts of wonderful speeches. You know, in the last State of the Union address, my mom said that, you know, she liked what the president had to say. It's just that we don't believe that he means it. You know, it's like the guy who says, "Oh, of course I'll respect you in the morning."
Very interesting way of putting it, for sure. But you're absolutely right, and I understand where you're coming from, Dan, in that, you know, you'd like to hope that things would work out in their current form, but unfortunately, it just doesn't happen that way. That's why I call them Republicrats, because they're both one and the same, you know? In Mordor and the Potomac, it doesn't matter whether you're a goblin or an imp. The fact remains that you're still a goblin or an imp. You're still part of that evil army. And so, you know, I really, truly think that we just need a gigantic toilet flush in Washington. Wipe the slate clean and let's start over again. You know, that's basically where we're going. Folks, we're going to break. When we come back, much more with my friend Dan. That's EducatoriumEuphorium on YouTube. And Michael Badnarik, ConstitutionPreservation.org. When the Freedom Link returns. Don't go away, folks. You know, it's not just the American people that are getting active, but we got some people north of the border that are really fighting just as hard for their natural God-given rights. And if you want to hear some more about that, tune in to Canada Live, featuring John and Ron, Sunday afternoon from 12 to 3 p.m. Get a view of the truth from our northern neighbors as John and Ron team up to tell it like it is. That's Sunday from 12 to 3 p.m. right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I'm joined tonight by Michael Badnarik, ConstitutionPreservation.org. Again, you want to schedule a class with Michael, please call him at 512-461-0995. And if you can't schedule a actual class with him, then by all means purchase his book. They're phenomenal reads. A must-have for your library, especially if you definitely have one, you know, in Liberty. By all means, purchase these books. Fantastic reads. I'm also joined by Dan, a homeschool student from the Northeast, and he has a YouTube channel, EducatoriumEuphorium. And as you heard in the last segment, he knows what's going on, and he's plugged in. And it's great to see these teenagers now taking the bull by the horns and kind of putting it out there that, look, the party's over, that things are going to start changing one way or another, and we're going to take this country back. And, Dan, you know, again, the floor is yours here because not too many times you get to talk to a former presidential candidate.
Yes, it's definitely a great opportunity. And I was wondering, I was just talking to a friend of mine over the internet and asking about the whole all these Second Amendment issues coming up recently. Do you think the Second Amendment is under attack, and do you think that there's a way that we can cut down on violent crime, and there's a way that we can reduce, you know, gun violence without necessarily restricting people's freedom?
Yeah, we can cut down on crime. Is to shoot the people committing the crime.
I agree with you.
We don't need fewer guns. We need more guns.
65.2 million guns sold since Obama became president. That's a staggering number, Michael.
We were talking about how many guns they purchased in the 3 weeks after the Sandy Hook shootings. It was 10 million guns.
I know, unbelievable.
Which is a lot of guns all by itself, but to think that they were all purchased in 3 weeks, that's very close to 500,000 guns a day. Most of those people paid 2 or 3 times the going rate for those guns. So I'm kind of guessing they're not likely to turn those guns in at the first confiscation effort.
Let me throw this out at you guys, and I want to get your opinion and Dan's opinion on this as well. Now, we've seen these blatant violations of posse comitatus in Miami, in Houston, actually a couple of locations in Texas where they're using, the black helicopters. They're loading them with blank rounds, but, still sounds like a machine gun, still sounds like live fire. And what appears to be conditioning, not only are they conditioning the public in that way, but couple that with this revelation, now that people are actively searching Fed BizOps and looking at all these contractual solicitations by the United States government, they're finding now, for example, no hesitation targets with pregnant women holding a gun, grandma in her kitchen holding a gun, grandpa in his library or his den holding a gun, or even my favorite, little Junior in his backyard by his swing set holding that gun. Michael, what could be the reasons for all of this conditioning?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Well, I'm just wondering, because I can't find any other reason except for they want to take the guns away and they want complete and total control, and or they're preparing for this civil unrest and they want to take the guns away. Either way, they want to take them away.
Yeah. I mean, that's fairly obvious to me.
Can you guys think of any other reason why? Just before we get to hear any of the rhetoric coming from the mainstream media or anything else, I'm curious. I don't want to believe it, but I know what it is. You know what I mean?
I mean, it disturbs me that they're even talking about it.
Yes.
It's like you overhear somebody who's practicing to rape your daughter. And you go, what are you saying?
Exactly.
Well, it's only practice. We're only going to be practicing. We're not going to actually be raping your daughter. We're just practicing to rape.
That's right.
Well, why would you be practicing if you weren't planning on it?
My point exactly. Dan, your thoughts on this?
Honestly, I'm not that acquainted with this issue, so I'm not sure if I can really give an opinion. But what I've managed to glean out of what you guys are saying and what I've just been quickly reading online, it sounds like this is definitely something really worrisome. And whenever you see government is it a kind of surveillance-related issue here?
Well, no. What it is a company, the Department of Homeland Security and some local law enforcement agencies solicited a company to make these no hesitation targets. And on this target, for example, there's a picture of a pregnant woman holding a gun. Just a regular old pregnant woman, minding her own business, just pointing a gun. Same with a little guy, probably about 8 years old, holding a gun by a swing set. And what this is meant to do is to condition the law enforcement and federal agents to not hesitate if they see a child or anything like that. And the only thing that I can glean from it is exactly that they're preparing for that. But that's not the only thing that I see them preparing for. And this is why plugging in, like Thomas Jefferson said, enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppression will vanish like the dark at the dawn of the day. Look, folks, not only are they doing this, not only are they violating posse comitatus, having these active exercises within city limits of these giant cities, but you also have the very uber-rich building bunkers in the Ozarks. You have deep underground military bases all over the place. You have these FEMA camps set up all over the place, which, by the way, guys, I mean, this is the way I kind of foresee it. Like, for example, when this sequester hits, a lot, if not most of the federal employees in this country are going to be furloughed 1 day a week, a total of 176 hours for, and basically it's a 20% reduction in pay. Now, I don't know many people that can absorb a 20% reduction in pay, and as a result, you're going to have a lot of people having their homes foreclosed on. They won't be able to feed their children, and it will have an adverse effect on the economy. I don't care who says that it won't. It will. And the interesting thing about these FEMA camps is it gives a nice place for people to go when they have nowhere else to go. We'll give you a bed. We'll give you 3 hot meals a day and a shower to clean yourself in. All you have to do is come in and work for us. Make stuff. That's what you have to do. That's it. What's your thought, Dan? What's your thoughts on that? Do you foresee that as a possibility?
Well, yeah, I think it's a possibility. I mean, the government has shown us that it's willing to do some pretty awful things, for the sake of increasing its own power. And my dad's been renting a lot of documentaries lately and watching them, and some of the stuff they show in those documentaries are just horrendous and horrifying. Like what governments, not just the U.S. government, but governments all over the world of supposedly civilized and democratic countries just doing, awful things. And I think that's obviously a possibility. But what I'm kind of worried about is that America will kind of die in a different way, that it it'll be just kind of a slow decline. Like there won't be anything super dramatic that'll happen. We'll just see what's been happening already. Just liberty slowly being eroded away, and eventually we're going to, realize that it didn't. There was no revolution. There was no, huge overthrow of the government. But we're in a country, a socialist country or fascist country or some kind of, extremely statist country. But I don't think it necessarily has to be a really big dramatic kind of transition. Just if we continue to conduct the way we're doing things, the way we're doing them now, it's just inevitably going to end up at that point.
Yeah, amen to that. Folks, when we come back, I'll get Michael's thoughts on that. We'll wrap the show up. It's been a fantastic couple of hours tonight with 2 very special guests and fighters for liberty. So don't go away. Much more when the Freedom Link returns right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Don't go away, folks.
So, what's interesting is...
Welcome back, folks. I want to get right back into the conversation with Michael Badnarik, 2004 Libertarian presidential candidate, ConstitutionPreservation.org, and my friend Dan, YouTube channel EducatoriumEuphorium. Hey, before we get back into it, Michael, I have a quick question from the audience. And this is, why is it that you need a license to conceal carry when the Second Amendment is pretty specific?
You don't need a concealed carry permit unless, of course, you are a United States citizen. It has a lot to do with your status, your political status. We, the people, ordained and established the Constitution. We invented government, so government works for us. In 1868, Congress created a legal status called United States citizen, which is subject to the jurisdiction of Congress. So if Congress created a United States citizen, then Congress has more power. Most of us have mistakenly identified ourselves as United States citizens subject to the jurisdiction of Congress. So a United States citizen needs a concealed carry permit. We, the people, do not. United States citizen needs a driver's license. We, the people, do not. And so now the question is, how do you become one of we, the people? And that's the primary discussion topic in my new book, Secret to Sovereignty.
Yeah, folks. So if you want to find out more about it, by all means. And how do people go about ordering it, Michael? They just go to the website and order it, correct?
Well, the book is not for sale, but the book is available for barter.
Barter, right, exactly.
I don't accept monopoly money. I don't accept Federal Reserve notes, and I don't accept Confederate money because all of those pieces of paper are worthless. And so in order to obtain the book, you have to trade something of value. And I'm willing to negotiate, but, I strongly recommend sending an ounce of silver. That's the easiest thing to mail in trade. But you can find out how to get that by going to my website, constitutionpreservation.org. There's a menu item called Secret to Sovereignty, and under that drop-down menu, you can learn to barter for the book.
That's fantastic. And so, folks, please go there today and barter your copy of Michael's new book, or even his older book, It's Good to Be King, which is a fantastic read. Definitely pumps you up, makes you feel like a king. And really, it's all it's all perception. Now, Dan, you brought up a great topic as well about the Title X soldier and how National Guard and Reserve troops can be put to use on the streets inside the United States, outside of their state. So I know it's kind of hard to understand, but that's what's happening more and more. And, you got to remember, too, that the NDAA 2012 really reshaped the whole idea of the battlefield on the war on terror. Not only is this a sham of a, quote, war, in that you don't know the enemy and the enemy has no borders, so how convenient, but that the United States then becomes a battlefield and you have basically now enemy combatants, and those are anybody that they deem an enemy combatant. But the question is, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment question, I get a lot of questions about what is the militia? What does it consist of? Because you always hear every able-bodied man from 18 to 45. Okay, well, where in law does it state that? And I actually found an act. It was the Efficiency of the Militia Act. It was written in 1903. It was promoted by General Dick. Horrible name, but he basically, there was a lot of talk in this time period about using the militia overseas. And so Congress went and defined what militia was by law, by enacting a law. So it says, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and in Congress assembled, that the militia shall consist of every able-bodied male citizen of the respective states, territories, and the District of Columbia, and every able-bodied male of foreign birth who has declared his intention to become a citizen, who is more than 18 and less than 45 years of age, and shall be divided into two classes: the organized militia, to be known as the National Guard of the state, territory, or District of Columbia, or by such other designation as may be given them by the laws of the respective state or territories. The remainder to be known as the reserve militia. So, Michael, if in fact every able-bodied man from the age of 18 to 45 is either part of the organized militia, the National Guard, or the reserve militia, wouldn't it behoove them to be armed?
I'm over 45, so I may not meet the legal definition of militia, but
I think it only meant, do you feel like you're 45 or younger?
Well, I'm old and stubborn. I just don't cotton to anybody telling me what I can do and not do. And I don't like anybody, messing up my country with all of their socialist propaganda. Mm-hmm. So, if my country is under attack, I may not be out doing calisthenics, but I'm definitely going to protect my country.
Amen to that. Hey, Dan, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering about this whole idea of the militia. Is the militia supposed to be kind of a spontaneous, more grassroots organization, or is it actually supposed to be like a regimented, top-down controlled organization? Because
well, there's two ways that they classify it by the Efficiency of the Militia Act. is the organized militia is just that. It's organized and known as the National Guard. Whereas the remainder, should you need anything else, let's just say that China decides to invade. Well, if that's the case, everybody at that point's the reserve militia, you know, and then you're called up and you have to defend. Now, how that happens or how that kind of pans out remains to be seen, if you ask me, because I don't think the threat is China. I think the threat is our own government run amok. And so at the end of the day, I guess the thing is what do you consider an attack? And this is something that everybody has to look inward on. What do you consider an attack? You know, because if you truly are an advocate for the Constitution and the concept that our rights come from the Creator and not from a piece of paper or legislation, then if you ask me, we've already been attacked and we're continually getting attacked. So then what do we do? Michael, what's your thoughts? We got a couple of minutes left.
It depends on what your definition of is.
Here it comes.
Hey, you know, we are under attack. Most of what the government does is unconstitutional. And, you know, the answer is fairly obvious. We need to take back our government, but it's going to require, you know, the American people to wake up to that responsibility. And I'm just kind of sitting along the sidelines waiting for that to happen.
Amen. Any closing thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I think on that subject, I think something good to remember is that force should always, for someone who holds a libertarian or a worldview that values human life and values peace and voluntary interaction, that force should always be a last resort, and that only when there's no way to, you know, to protect yourself or to protect your family or to protect your country through peaceful means, then that's the point where you can resort to force. But an important thing is, you know, peaceful resistance, you know, not just, you know, resisting the government in a peaceful way. And that's something that I think a lot of people kind of lose sight of sometimes. And it's something that takes sometimes more bravery than just, you know.
It actually does. Dan, that's a great point. That's a fantastic point. It does. Because when you start peaceful resistance or noncompliance, that's kind of like taking the first step. You know, the first step's always the hardest. Once you get going and you've got that momentum behind you, it's not so bad after that, but it's taking that first step forward. Now, there are people in the past that have done that. Noncompliance, they didn't want to pay taxes. They felt like, me personally, I feel like if you pay taxes, you're complicit in the fact that there are drone strikes and they're killing children overseas, or there's drones over here. Guess why? Because we pay for it. And if you pay for it, you're complicit. So the idea of non-compliance is really, really crucial at this point in time. And I hope that a lot of people out there, you know, start to think about that. Start to look at the actions of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and see what they did. But folks, we're out of time for tonight. Michael, thank you so much for coming on. ConstitutionPreservation.org, folks, to visit Michael's site. And Dan, thank you so much for coming on such short notice. EducatoriumEuphorium, his YouTube channel. Go subscribe today, folks.